Hey guys, my guest tonight, Lynn Monet, and I are going to be talking about death, life, and the afterlife. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Well, good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? We're finally there. It's Thursday, the night before Friday, right? Tomorrow's Friday. Get everybody's weekend started. And what a weekend it's going to be. It's been clear here in California, but of course the rain is going to start up Saturday. That's the breaks. We had like 3 or 4 days to clean up this mess. Now we get to prep for the next mess. Anyway, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I am going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you might have a paranormal problem going on in your home or business, we can help you out. It may take us a while to get to you because California is a rather large state, but we will get to you. And if we can't get to you, we have people on staff, mediums like Nancy Matz, right? Well, let's just throw a name out there, Nancy Matz and Karen Clark, who can call you and maybe help you figure out, pretty much what's going on and keep it under control till we can get there, or keep it low down. I say under control, but kind of on the low down till we get out there. So my head's always crooked. I swear my head's crooked. Always had, as a photographer, so always had my nose problem. The ridge of my nose up here is off balance, so my photos were always like this, and we could never figure it out. And finally, one day, I figured out that I had to compensate. Anyway, that's enough of that. Enough about me. So so we can get out and help you out. Now, if you're watching the show from Facebook and you haven't done so already, and you like what you hear, please be sure to hit that, hit those thumbs up and the hearts and all that good stuff. And if you haven't decided to follow, please do that. Because we are doing a show every day here between Sunday and Friday. We got a show going every day. Real cool guests like the guest we're going to have tonight. Okay. So that's a way to follow us. Also, same thing, if you're on YouTube and you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. And that'll, you can see them anyway. I'm just saying that'll alert you every time we have a show coming out, a new show. Also, we have more than 541 videos over at YouTube. And since I'm a journalist, I like to change it up. I don't like to cover paranormal stuff all the time. So there's all kinds of different topics over there, and I'm sure there's something you'll like. Like, for instance, last night we had a gentleman on, Dr. Randall Bell, and we talked about how to turn trauma into something positive. So I like to cover different topics. Okay, that being said, the Patreon is up and running, the California Haunts Radio Patreon. I did not get a chance today to put any links in the description for this show. However, if you guys go visit YouTube later on tonight, I will have the link in for the Patreon. Now, the idea with the Patreon is that it's $5.50 for membership on my Patreon. But like I'm always asking you guys for help, with funds here, because we're trying to keep the show going, right? This is a way to keep everything going, and it's an additional way to keep everything going. But you're going to get a lot of stuff. I did a pre-recorded video today with another interview, and that's going to be the first one that we have over on Patreon. Because what's going to happen is when I do a pre-recorded interview, those are going to be shown over at the Patreon first for the people that subscribe. And then maybe a week later, the same video is going to show on California Haunts, on the regular California Haunts Radio YouTube. So it's kind of like a treat for the people that subscribe. Not only that, we're going to do special one-on-one talks with people that have appeared on the show. Like there might be a question that you wanted to ask that you didn't ask while we were on the air, and then you could go over to the Patreon and you could do a one-on-one for an hour or so with the guest. Okay, we're going to be doing that. Nancy's going to do special readings over there for people. We're going to have private, psychic readings over there. We get enough people signed up, and I'm going to do giveaways every month. Okay, it's going to be random giveaways. California Haunts coffee cups, things like that. I'm gonna give away. So, like I said, I do not have the setup for the Patreon yet in the description of the show today, but I will have it after the show. I will go ahead and put it in there for you guys. Okay, it's just I'm short on time because I pre-recorded a show earlier, which ended at 5:45, and then here I am right here doing this. Okay, that's enough of that. And yes, also if you like the show while you're watching it, share it around. Okay, now I'm done. I'm winded. My guest tonight has been on before, and she had a fascinating and scary story to tell about a house that she purchased and what happened in that house. But tonight she's coming on. We'll touch base a little bit about the after effect on that house. But tonight she's coming on, and we're going to be talking about something that everybody's interested in. It's something I witnessed. I took care of my mother and father in their elder age, and it wasn't so much my father, but my mother. I witnessed stuff, with her as she got closer to her death. That was rather interesting. And I saw some apparitions as she got closer to her death. Apparitions of my aunts, my deceased relatives that were hanging out at the house. So Lynn is a nurse, and she has some stories to tell. She's got a book out about the subject, and she's going to talk to us about that tonight. So I'm really excited about this. So sit back and like the like the intro says, grab some jammies, grab some snacks. We're gonna have a good show tonight. So here we go. Where's my mouse? There we go.
Hi.
Welcome
Hi,
back.
Charlotte.
How
It's
are
great
you?
to see you. You look
It's good to
amazing. It's
Wow,
good to
it's been
see
a
you.
while.
Yeah, it has. It has been a while. I've actually got almost 5 books out now, but
Wow.
you have to balance the paranormal. I mean, it's still paranormal, but there's a white, loving side to paranormal as well as the dark stuff. And please forgive my kitchen. I just had a cast taken off, and so I have to prop my foot up on a chair. So welcome to Lynn's kitchen. I hope my
Cool.
dishes are done. I'm pretty sure they are. So yeah, thank you so much for having me back. And that Patreon thing sounds. I want to join. So yeah, definitely let me know when that's up and going strong, and I will definitely become
I
a
will do that.
member.
I will do that. Yeah. I was hoping to do it today, but I ran out of time because I was setting up for your show, was setting up for the other show, did the pre-record on the other show, and then boom, I had like a half hour in between. Lynn's not going to say anything, but if she saw me through the green room, I was sucking on a couple cookies.
Oh, there you go.
Trying to have the energy to start flopping on the show tonight.
Oh, wow. Well, it's really, really great to see you. So thank you so much for
That's great.
having me on.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Do you want me to just go ahead and go?
Well, yeah. You know what? Let's for the people that don't
Okay.
remember who you are, or the newer people that watch the show. Tell us
Mhm.
about you, because I know we talked about your house, or that house the
Yes.
last time you were on, that scary spooky house that gave me nightmares.
Yes. Uh, um, well, as she said, my name is Lynn Monet. I have had abilities ever since I was very, very young. My family and I lived 3 short blocks behind a hospital that was connected with a nursing home. So my siblings and it was commonplace to see patients in patient gowns walking through the house. But of course, back in the 60s, yes, I'm going to be 60 in May, but back in the 60s, I was born in 1963. That's not something that you really talked about, because everything was about what the Joneses would find out. And you would literally have men in white coats come and pick you up for stuff like that, take you for lobotomy. So you didn't really talk about it. And of course, it was not supported in my family at all. So when I got to be about 5 years old, something very profound happened. I was in my mother and father's bedroom, and I was in my mom's jewelry box, like little girls like to do, and I was decorating myself. And my brother was in the room with me on the floor playing with his cars, and he was 2 years older than me. I was 5, he was 7. And I turned to show him how glamorous I had made myself. And of course, he's staring, he's fixated on this corner of my parents' bedroom wall. And so I turn, to look and see what he's looking at. And there's this misting there. And in the misting steps in my brother's best friend, John, the mother, father, and then brother. And they're all just standing there smiling at us. So my brother gets up and runs out of the room calling for my mother. I get up and run out of the bedroom in the opposite direction calling for my mother. And of course, my brother finds her first, and he says, Mom, John's here and his family. And she's like, I didn't even hear anybody knock. And he says, and they're in your bedroom. And she's like, they're in my bedroom. Who let them in my bedroom? So of course she's dropping the laundry and rushing, trying to usher these people out of her bedroom because her bed wasn't made. And so when she got in there, of course, there was nothing there. And my brother did get in trouble. And of course, I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to get in trouble too, even though I had seen the same thing. But the very next day was the first day back to school after spring break. And my brother was riding on the bus, and little John used to always sit with him on the bus. They were best buddies. And of course, he wasn't there that day. And then when my brother got to school, they shared a desk because there were two people at each table, and he shared the table with John. And again, John wasn't there. And after the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, the teacher stood up in front of the class and said that John would not be returning to school because he and his entire family perished in an auto accident the day before. And it happened that day. It happened the day that we saw him. So it was like John had come to say goodbye. So I continued to see things. And when I was about 10 years old, I was raised Presbyterian. My mom decided to take a jaunt with the Jehovah's Witnesses, which we won't go there, but that's a book in itself. I will say that. And because I was still seeing things, she brought me to what they call the elders. And the elders in the church are similar to like the priest or the minister, the people that are the head of the church that make the decisions. And I am standing at 10 years old, petrified in front of all of these men who are telling me that I'm crazy, telling me that I'm possessed, telling me that, that what I'm seeing is demons. And I got so frightened by my own gifts that I continued to say things. And even if it was something like my great grandmother that should be comforting, I would run out of the room screaming just as fast as anybody else, thinking that it was a demon. So coming forward as a single mother, I was trying to purchase a home to provide for my family a better home. And that's where my first book comes into play. It's called Omnipresent. And the story is about a book that the house was so haunted that I was never able to actually move into the house. With that, and I don't mind telling a little bit about that, but I know that we only have an hour, and
right.
I want to get into the good
segue
stuff.
Into the other stuff, right?
Yeah. So after I did sell the house, and for anybody that's wants to judge, I did try to tell the people that the house was haunted, and they didn't want to hear it. They said they were Baptists. They didn't discuss those sorts of things. So I did try to tell them, but it was a very eye-opening book. However, it also put me in touch with people of like mind. So, and people that were seeing things in the house the same time I was. So it helped me to start to nurture my gifts again. And I started, to realize that it was okay, to have those gifts. So after the house was sold, I did write another book that was called Omnipresent is actually going to end up being a series of 5 books. So in book 2, Omnipresent, What Happened Next, it talks about what happened to the people ended up moving out of the house 6 months later. I did get a hold of the family that I purchased the house from and got the stories about how their children were being attacked and how strange things were happening. And that's the reason why they also left and moved out. And another thing too is with my ability to nurture my gift of second sight, I was able to use my abilities when I went back to school. I had gone back to school to further my degree. I've been a nurse 37 years. I also have a degree in biological science. But I went back to further my degree as a nurse, and we had to do a rotation through, when we took our psych class, we had to do rotations through facilities dealing with psychiatric patients. And I, with my second sight, I was able to identify people with attachments. And a lot of those people that are misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, you're not hearing the voices in your head. They're being whispered in your ear. And, I could see those attachments on people. I even took them off of one girl that was there that was actually being clawed. She had claw marks all over her. She was covered in that. I'd be happy to tell that story if you want me to, but
sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I had, as a student, there were 8 of us. We went into this facility. It was the intake area. So there were some violent patients in there that hadn't had their medication balanced. We literally had to sign papers that if we got knocked in the head with something or bitten by somebody or something happened to us, that we couldn't hold the facility responsible. So the teacher had left to go and get our assignments with patients. And there was this young woman in her early 20s that walked up and she points at me and she says, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course, I'm like, oh my God, I hope she's not talking to me, because, I'm kind of looking over my shoulder and I'm like, please, please don't be talking to me. Because that day I didn't want to be Lynn, the weirdo. I wanted to be Lynn, the student nurse, and, type thing. And so the teacher came by at that time and she said, don't make eye contact, don't speak to anybody. And she ushered us out of the room. However, I was then placed back in that area with one other nurse. And the other nurse and I were sitting, they had tables, picnic tables in there that were bolted to the floor. So we were sitting at the picnic tables doing our nurses, our charting, and the young woman comes over. And anybody that's familiar with my story with the house knows that someone did get clawed to the point of bleeding while they stood next to me in that kitchen. So I'm looking at this woman sitting next to me, and she is covered in claw marks, covered. And I mean, she had them coming out of her ear, her nose. She was talking about how she heard 25 different voices. She said that she was molested by her pastor when she was like 10 to 14. And then her mother got remarried and the stepfather started raping her and she ran away at 16 and then got into some form of devil worship. And now she's hearing these 25 different voices. But I'm sitting with this woman and she had on a spaghetti straps with a top, so I could see her back, I could see her shoulders, her arms, a lot of the skin on her body. And I mean, she had claw marks in areas that there would be absolutely no way, unless she was a contortionist, that she would be able to do that by herself. But of course, the institution was claiming that she had self-administered those. And she even talked about one that she said had a long nail that was actually clawing her on the inside of her female parts. But again, they were claiming that she was doing this to herself. So as she's sitting there telling us, myself and the other nurse, her story, she was called away because it was her time with the psychiatrist or therapist or whoever it was, where they would go and sit and have a session with. And when she got up to walk away, she had over each shoulder, kind of like Santa Claus bags. They were about as big as a standard pillowcase. Over each shoulder, like clear. I'm saying clear bags only because the way that it looked like they were held together by something. They were clustered like grapes. They looked like misshapen potatoes, but they were heads. And some of them were inverted. So the eyes were on the bottom and the mouth was on the top. And I'm like, oh my God, that young woman really is hearing 25 different voices. She's got attachments on her back. And at that time, I was going through a lot of personal stuff. I was taking care of my mother in my house that was dying of cancer and going through a divorce. And I had a 3-year-old at home, with a teenager. And so when you remove things like that off of people, which I do remove things like that off of people, you have to be prepared and protect yourself, because that's not something that you want to attach to you and that you take home with you. Right. And that can happen. So you need to make sure that you are overflowing, because when you get into that kind of energy, and I'm sure Charlotte will agree with me on this, it's exhausting when you're finished, because you constantly have to put a bubble of protection around yourself, because you're constantly being attacked by the entities in the room, because they know that you're there to get them out. And of course, they don't want to leave. So they're attacking you, and you have to have like a force field. And it takes a lot of energy to keep that and maintain that like force field, for lack of a better word, up. So anyway, she came back from her hour with her therapist, and I went to her room and I knocked on the door frame, and she invited me in, and I said, listen, I said, what I'm about to tell you, I said, if you tell anybody else, they're going to think you're crazy. I said, and they're going to keep you in here longer. I said, so I believe that you're hearing 25 different voices because you have attachments on your back. I said, I can see them. And I said, when you get out of here, you need to go and find someone to remove these things. And something just came, she kind of turned her back to walk towards her bed, and something just, I don't know where the strength came from, but I just felt it come through. And I literally took my fingers, the way that those bags were attached to her is it was almost looked like a horn type thing that was kind of twisted and attached at the top of the shoulder and kind of clasped up into her armpit. So it wasn't all the way over. They were like C clasps almost. And I went and I put my fingers and I lifted them off. And I was really surprised at how easy they came off. And of course, when I pulled them away from her, they started falling all over the ground. And I'm trying to step on them and mash them into the ground. A few of them rolled away. And she turned immediately and she said, "It felt like you were pulling grass off my back." She didn't even know that I was doing that. And she's like, what did you do? It felt like you were pulling grass off of my back. So she felt it. And I explained to her, I said, "Look, this is a temporary fix. I got a lot of them off of you, so you're not going to hear as many voices. You do have some clustered over there by your bed." I said, "Your house probably has some in them, but you need to please go find someone when you get out of here that can help you remove those things." Lo and behold, about a year later, I'm in Walmart. I'm squatted down in the candles section looking at candles, and there's these two women at the end of the aisle, and they're whispering and looking at me. And I'm like, oh my God, do I have a piece of toilet paper on my shoe, or my zipper down? Maybe my butt's showing, I didn't know why they were, talking. And then all of a sudden I hear the one girl say to the other, I know that's her. I'm going to go say something. I thought, oh, well, maybe it's a fan, my book. And this woman walks over, and she was familiar to me, but she looked so different that I hardly recognized her. When she was in the facility, I mean, her head was almost shaved. She was, she was a different weight, but she was, when you get overtaken from things like that, they drain even your color out of your skin. And it just, she had this short little blonde bob. She had her makeup on. She looked beautiful. And I'm like, you're familiar to me, but I'm sorry. I said, I don't know. She says, "You're the nurse. You're the nurse that helped me." And then she started to tell me, and I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Look at you." She says, "Yeah, I'm in my first year of dental hygiene school." She said, "And I'm off all of my schizophrenic medication, and I'm only taking something now for mild anxiety." And I thought to myself, oh my God, So with that being said, when I continued there that day before I saw her that year later, I started looking at other patients in the facility, and I could pick out the ones that had schizophrenia versus the ones that had addiction. Addiction also carries attachments, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But those clustered heads are like souls, that either don't want to cross over, they want to latch onto you. So anyway, a couple of my friends had patients with schizophrenia, and I said, is your diagnosis schizophrenia? And they're like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just wondered." And I mean, literally like 98% of the time I was, correct. There was only one that had multiple things going on, addiction and, being diagnosed with it, also with attachments that I, kind of missed. But in addition to that, I was able to walk around the facility and see people who had been admitted for addictive reasons. And those people also carry what I call archons. They look like spiders, like crabs, and also they can look reptilian. Sometimes the reptilian ones have a tail that will curl and kind of attach, kind of sit on the hip, or they have a human buttocks with no tail on the reptilian ones only. And the distinct things about these attachments are their heads are much smaller in proportion to their body. So it's kind of the opposite of like a child, the baby's got the big head, the little body in comparison. It is the opposite. And they have a very, very distinct fin that starts at the top of their head and goes back to the back of their neck, but it's not rigid like a dolphin fin, it's floppy. So when they turn their head, it will sometimes flop over their face, and you'll kind of see the head off over one shoulder of the other, but they fit like neat little backpacks on their back. And the thing about these archons are that the only way that those can be removed is the person needs to clean up their addictive issue, and then they will detach, but they never leave. They will always, once you invite one into your life, they wait for an opportunity, even after you've cleaned up your addiction, they wait for an opportunity to taunt you and get you to get back on the substance so that they can reattach. I mean, they had a good thing going. Of course they want to continue. So, and this is why it is so difficult for people with addictions to get off the substance, because of these things that they stay in their homes. My brother actually had an addiction problem, and his archon, even though he had not touched alcohol or drugs for 20 some odd years, would precede him in my house when he was coming to visit. And my children would see it because they're empaths and they've been supported with their gifts. And I would see it. And the thing about it is it jumps from the ceiling from corner to corner or back and forth. It usually doesn't come down farther than like 3 feet from the ceiling. Like you won't see it crawling around the floor or on the furniture. And it'll turn its head all the way around. And forgive me, I don't know if that's a 180 or 90 degrees, but it turns its head all the way around. And that's why I say the thin thing flaps over its face because sometimes on the ceiling, it has feet almost like a frog. It's got four digits on the feet and the fingers on the reptilian looking one. My brother had a reptilian looking one. And it would show up in my house and I'd be like, oh, Uncle Ray's going to come to visit. And lo and behold, I kid you not, like within 24 hours, I get the call. Oh, we're going to come up this weekend. We're bringing, they had this camper and we're coming up this weekend. And I'm like, yep, I know you were. And the thing is I actually also, when I went to visit his house at one point, saw it in his house. So it stayed with him. And they do stay with you, just waiting for that opportunity to to reattach. So I was able to see that too in the facility. But with my ability to have second sight, I was able to see my mother come out of her body at the time of her death. And I wrote a book about it called Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. It is not part of the Omnipresent series. It's separate from the Omnipresent series. And also being a end-of-life care nurse for 17 of the 37 years, going on 38 years. We won't go there though. I have seen a lot of people pass away. I do help people cross over at that time. And the thing about it is that a lot of times people know when they're getting ready to pass, because they'll start talking about it, or they'll start talking about seeing loved ones. And sometimes this can even occur a year before they even cross over. And I've got some stories to share with you about that to really bring it home. But my mother actually was in hospice. She had cancer. She decided to stop treatments. And we checked off her bucket list for that year beforehand, and she ate lasagna every week at her favorite restaurant and enjoyed it. And we got that dash of stuff in her recipes down to a science so that we could make it exact. And when her time finally came for her to go to hospice, she was wheeling herself in the facility, saying goodbye to people. And she actually told one lady whose dog had passed away a couple of days before that she would take care of the dog on the other side for her until the lady could get there to retrieve her dog. And yes, your pets do cross over, and don't be surprised when you get there if you have an elephant or camel approach you, because you may have had that pet at another time, because all your pets are up there. So get ready. And usually the pets have their own time to meet with their loved ones, because you meet with your people and loved ones first, and the pets usually have their own little second show. But there are some times when a dog will come in if a person would prefer that, when their time does come to cross. So anyway, with my mother, I would, if you want me to, I'll share that story. It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, a lot of times people, when they are in the active transitioning stages of transitioning over, sometimes they leave their bodies early, and they can even leave it a couple of days early for that matter. And then the body physically just is there to finish. They're not any longer in there. Some choose to stay in until the very, very last minute. And in my mother's case, she chose to stay in until the very last minute. And this was obvious because even though she could no longer open her eyes and she could no longer verbalize words, she would move her eyebrows and try to mouth words. And it was appropriate. People would come into her room and they would say, "Hi, Phyllis," and she would, in response. And also there was one point I was telling a story that she didn't like, and she was grimacing, and I know she could, because she was like frowning with her things. So her responses were appropriate. It wasn't just random. And so on the day that she passed away, and again before that, she was telling people, and sure enough, she did pass away the next day, because she was telling people, "Tomorrow I'm going home. I'm going home." And again, I told you the story about the dog, but and she did. She crossed over around lunchtime that day. But I was the only one in the room with her, sitting there. My brother was on his way to get there, but he wasn't able to make it in time. And I believe that it was meant to be that way because of the experience that I was left with, that I may have missed if I had been distracted, by having someone else there. So I'm sitting in a recliner next to my mom's bed, and the whole wall on the opposite side of the room started to mist. I mean, wall to wall, floor to ceiling. And I could see movement on the other side. And like sometimes I would see like a shoulder stick out. And in this one case, I saw a pant leg with a shoe. And yes, people, they do show up with clothes on. Nobody wants to see mom naked. It would be pretty shocking. "Oh yeah, mom, it's nice to see you, but I don't want to hug you if you're naked." So, they do show up in clothes. And usually they show up in what they've passed away in, if it's a lost soul that hasn't crossed over. And let me just say this. There are three kinds of death. There's natural death, which most of us have. There is a sudden death, which is handled differently on the other side, as well as near-death experience. My mother had a natural death, and that's kind of the avenue that I'm taking right now to talk about. But so the misting was there, and it started to efface on the area towards the head of the bed. And in that, my grandmother, my mother's mother, walked in, and she looked the exact same. She had that 1980s tight curly perm, and she had the little leisure suit that she had made for herself that she was buried in. She even presented in glasses. I mean, she looked the exact same as I remember seeing her last. And she walked over to my mother's bedside, and she started to stroke the inside of my mother's forearm. My mom was sitting kind of at a slant. And so my grandmother's reaching, she's stroking her forearm, and she goes forward and she says something in my mother's ear. And I see my mother responding to her comment with the mouthing thing and the eyebrow thing. And then my grandmother leaned forward again and did this like 3 times. I see this frantic wave behind my grandmother's head, also in that opening that has effaced. And it was my beautiful sister Robin, who had been murdered by a jealous boyfriend when she had just turned 20. And I could smell her perfume. Her perfume filled the room. She wore an unusual perfume called Latisse back in the 80s. And she came around from the misting and actually embraced me. I could feel her beautiful hair going over my face. I could smell her. I could feel her essence. And when she went back around, all of the misting was gone. The whole side of the room had opened up. And I could see into the other side, and there were hundreds of people there. And anybody that talks about UFOs and things, it's all connected. It's all connected. So it's not just one or the other. It's all connected. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at they've created this beautiful reception for my mother. They have colors on the other side that we do not have here. You would need a couple of color wheels, and it's not just that they're colors. There's an energy about the colors and an essence that when you look at them and you connect with them, it's like you almost become one, like they're living colors, if that even makes sense. The light, there's no light source. The light seems to emit from within the atmosphere itself, and the lighting is perfect. The temperature is perfect. And the love and elation that was coming from that other side while I was sitting there was like, there are no words that can describe it, and there's not a feeling that can touch it. It was like getting something that you have missed, that you had forgotten that you even ever experienced. And you can't help but sit there and smile. But so I'm sitting there and I'm watching these things, and the people, and all of a sudden I said to my mom, I said, "Mom," I gave her a kiss. I said, "I love you. I'm going to be fine, but Grandma and Robin are here, and it's time for you to go home." And of course, she did the mouthing thing and the eyebrow thing. And within 10 minutes, she took her last breath. But before that happened, I'm noticing up towards the head of her bed, this group of beings that were like in a football huddle, like right next to her bed, like double layered. And when they opened, my mother was standing in the middle. It was kind of like they were trying to, help her with her spiritual feet, to ground her, in her spirit form. And so there was my mother, she was beaming. She was so happy. And one by one, these people, I mean, some of them I recognized from this lifetime, a couple of uncles and grandparents and things like that had crossed over. Some of them I didn't, but my mother did. She knew who those people were, and they were greeting her. And, in that moment, I'm watching her, how happy she is and all of that elation. And of course, I'm like, I wish that I could just step in for the day, and go for the party too. So, but of course, you'd have to die to do that. And it wasn't my time. So, she's greeting these people. And, there were also these beautiful, there were angels, there were loved ones, there were these spirits that appeared to be the level of angels, but they didn't have wings. They were very tall. They were gorgeous. I don't know if they were male or female, or if they were neutral, or if that even mattered. They didn't matter. They were gorgeous, and they were also there to help. And they kind of looked like they were from somewhere else. And we really have to consider the fact that there are so many stars in the sky that are actually sunshines to solar systems, that it would be, I think that it would be ignorant on our part not to believe that there are other, other people living on other solar systems, maybe even people like us or different. But the truth of the matter is, if you want to take a scientific edge on it, energy can't be created or destroyed. So even in other solar systems, if there are beings that complete their lifespan or whatever it was they were intended to do, they have to go somewhere, So I mean, these were gorgeous. They weren't creepy ones like the bugs and the bug-looking ones that you see on people see on. These were gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful. I mean, so tall they were like skimming their heads on the ceiling. But as I'm sitting there, the room kind of thinned out. And let me just back up too. After I saw her come out of her body, and I'm sitting there, I'm smiling. You can't help but smile when you're in the midst of all of this elation. And I look over and I noticed that my mom had stopped breathing, and I'm like, oh my God, I better call the nurse, because if she walks in, my mother's dead and I'm smiling, she's going to wonder what I did to her. That's not a normal response,
Right.
So, yes, so I called the nurse. The nurse came in and she pronounced that she had crossed over. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But, of course, they have to do that legally. But I asked her, I said, can I stay? Because I wanted to see what else was going to happen. And I mean, what went on literally was like 20 minutes. Our time, it's different. It went on. The nurse came in and walked through them. They didn't seem to be bothered. They just ignored her. Everything continued on. And finally, the room thinned out. And there were about the 5 of those souls. My grandmother and my sister were still there walking with my mother. And where I was sitting, there were windows behind me. And I know they say, when somebody is crossing away to crack a window. And I don't know if there's anything to that. But it might have just been a coincidence that they were headed towards those windows, and they might have been headed in that direction anyway. But as they were starting to file out, they made connection with the top of my head, and it felt very tingly. And my mother, I recognized my mother as she approached, because she had beautiful legs, and I could see her legs in her patient gown. And the way that I see spirits is out of my peripheral vision. I can see them as plain as I can see you. I can tell you what they have on, what color their hair is. I can tell you all of that. When they are at a distance in front of me, they appear to me like when you go to a mall or something and you're walking up and there's a giant plate glass window and you see your reflection in it. They look like that to me, like that reflective type of thing. And when they're close up to me, I see a wavering, waffling to the air, kind of like vapors off of a hot road or gas fumes, how they waver in the air. And sometimes I'll see a lower half. But so anyway, so my mother, I see her legs, I can't see her upper half. And of course she crosses with them. And I never grieved my mother's loss, because to me, she wasn't dead. I mean, she's still around me, and there's some comical things that have happened with that too, that if we have time, I will share those. But go ahead. Did you want to ask me something?
No, I was just thinking about when my father passed, and when you talk about like one wall of the room or one half of the room, when my father passed, you always think of people when they pass that their eyes are going to be rolled out or they're looking up. He was looking off to the side, like someone had been standing over there to come get him, like his mother or somebody. Mm-hmm. And that's where his eyes were set.
Yes.
So, I get all this. This is fantastic.
Yeah, being a nurse for 17 years in end-of-life care, I've got some stories that'll really bring this home for people. I'd be happy to share those if you want me to continue. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
I had one patient that was totally blind. She had just come on my unit. I didn't know her that well. She'd only been with us for a couple of weeks. And her kids come to her. She had a son and a daughter that come to the nurse's station, and they say to me, "Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there." Right. And I'm like, okay, well, I expected that, you know what I mean? Because this is part of the transitioning thing. And so I said, well, let me walk down with you and see if I can help make your mom more comfortable, see if she needs something. So we walk down together, and we walk into the room. She's also sitting at a slant, but she's reaching into the air, trying to, like she's handling something very delicate. Like somebody's handing her snowflakes or something, and she's so happy. She's grinning. Her face is lit up with whatever it is that she's doing, trying to reach these things. And I said to her when we walked in the room, I said, "Edna," I said, "who's here?" And she said, "George." And her daughter had to sit down. She became as white as a sheet, and she said, "George is my father." She says, my father's been dead for X amount of years. And then Edna speaks up and she says, "And he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie." Pixie was her poodle. When her husband passed away and Edna was blind, the son had to take possession of the dog, who was still very much an old dog, like 15, 16 years old, but it was still very much alive. And he had her. And he told me the story. He says, "Well, I have her." He says, do you think that my mom's hallucinating? And I always, you can't say, "No, I don't think she's hallucinating. This is what happens. Loved ones do come forward, to get them." And I said, "Well, do you think she's hallucinating?" And he says, "Well, I don't know." And I said, do you mind if I try something?" I said, I'm not trying to change your belief system. I said, but in my experience, loved ones do come forward to collect their, to help their loved ones cross over. I said, "Would you mind if I try something?" And he said, he said, "Go ahead." And I said, "Edna," I said, "can I ask George a question?" And she nodded her head yes. And I said, "What color is your son's shirt?" And she said, "Yellow." Now, he was wearing a pastel yellow Ralph Lauren polo shirt. And keep in mind that this woman was totally blind, no shadows, nothing. She could see nothing. So in that moment, it became very profound for the son. And he's like, "Hi, Dad." He got it in that moment that his father spirit was actually there with his mother. And I have also another a story, and this is one of my favorite ones because this lady was just precious. They're all precious, but this lady, I got to know her well, and we kind of connected in that way. And her name was Abigail. Where I was working, it was a facility with 3 different levels of care. So there was independent, assisted living, and skilled. And I was working in the skilled area as a nurse. And she and her husband came to the facility looking for care because of his health deteriorating. So Abigail ended up slipping and falling and fracturing her hip and ended up on my unit for a little while. And we kind of made friends that way and built a rapport. And there was one day that I came in particular, and Abigail was upset. And I asked her, I said, what's wrong? And she says, "Do you think I'm crazy?" And of course, because we had that rapport built up, I was teasing her. I'm like, "Define crazy." She says, No. She says, "I mean, crazy, crazy." And I'm like, "Well, no, of course not. Why would you even say something like that?" And she said, "Well, I see my parents." She says, "I know that they died a long time ago, but it makes me happy." She said, and I see them. And now because I see my parents, the doctors want to put me on medication for hallucinations. And she didn't want to take it. And I told her, I said, I was a night shift nurse and I'd come on. I said, well, in report, I heard that tomorrow morning they're going to be discharging you home. I said, and as your advocate, if you're of sound mind, which you are, I said, you can refuse to take the medication. You don't have to take it. And of course she was happy with that. And she was discharged and went home. And about 6 months later, her health started to rapidly decline and she ended up on my unit again. And this time when she returned, she was talking about seeing, in addition to her parents, a woman with a little girl. And the thing is this little girl and woman were so real to her that she would sneak cookies and snacks from the patient dining room back to her room to give to the little girl. And of course, this was making a bug problem. So we had to stop her from doing that. And there was one day in particular that a friend of mine that worked the day shift needed the day off. And she asked if I would cover her. So I agreed to go in and cover her. And I had the hallway with Abigail, and all of the residents had come back. They'd been back in their rooms after lunch. And I get my treatment cart ready to go down and do my treatments. And as I'm passing Abigail's room, she has this woman with this little girl standing in her room in front of her. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, yay, great. Abigail's got some visitors today. Isn't that nice? And the way that Abigail was sitting is there was a big picture window with an air conditioner underneath like hotels have. And she was off to the side in a recliner, but she was leaning forward with this piece of yellow butterscotch wrapped candy in her hand, trying to give it to the little girl. So I thought to myself, I took about 3 to 5 steps from the door. And I remember thinking, hey, wait a minute. I don't remember those people signing in. And we legally have to have a head count just in case there's an emergency and the fire department has to come and get the people. They need to know how many people are in the building to to get out of the building if there's an emergency. So I backed up and I knocked on the door frame and she invited me in. And of course, when I completely entered the room, there was nothing there. But I could see the waffling like right a foot from me, that close. I could see the waffling. So I knew that the spirits were still there. And Abigail says to me, she says, I want you to meet my friend. She says, isn't the little girl beautiful? And I said, yes, she is. Abigail springs forward in her chair and she's like, can you see them? And I'm like, yes. And she says, don't tell anybody. She says, because they'll think you're crazy and put you on medication. So here this woman was being heavily medicated for hallucinations, and she was still seeing her parents and these other people because she wasn't hallucinating, and she had the wherewithal to know the difference. And about a month later, she was in an active decline, and I came in on shift. And I'll share this with you. This is special. It makes me cry. Sure. But I came in, I was night shift, and she was in the stage of rallying, which nurses are aware what this is, where their toes kind of go flaccid and they get that glazed look over to their eyes, and they're laying there. And then all of a sudden, their toes will perk and their eyes will brighten and they'll come back. And they're like testing the dimensions. But sometimes even when they come back, they'll start talking about seeing people and even children that haven't been born yet. They'll tell about things like that. I've had that happen a couple of times as well, and it turned out to be true. But anyway, I go in and I see her, and she's in that stage of rallying, and I stroke her arm and I say, Miss Abigail, it's Lynn. I'm here to check your blood pressure. And her eyes just brightened, and she said to me, she said, I am so glad that I get to see you one more time. She said, I'm going home tomorrow with my parents when they come and get me. I knew what that meant. So right. I said to her, I mean, I was tearing up at that moment anyway. And I said to her, I said, you precious lady. I said, thank you so much, for coming into my life and allowing me to be part of your healthcare team. And she interrupts me, and she had this huge personality that way. She always smiling. And she said to me, and I want to tell you something. She says, you're very much loved on the other side, and you need to keep doing what you're doing. And I'm sorry. But and I said to her, I said, oh, I said, we will meet see each other again? And she says, oh, we most certainly will. And yeah, and so the next night I was off and I could feel her. I made it home. I was looking at the clock. It was like 10:30 at night. I made it home. And so the next day I just called, a friend of mine had come off shift. She mentioned that she had passed away, and found out that she had crossed over between those hours. And she was just, kind of letting me know she had made it home. But, even people, I have another, for instance, if I can share that one too.
Real quick, there's a question. Somebody's got a question for you.
Oh, sorry. I had a patient with Alzheimer's, and I had worked at the facility for 7 years, and I remember her when she was up walking around and talking to people, but she hadn't spoken one word in 3 years. And I'm at the nurse's station, and she's in front of the nurse's station, and all of a sudden I hear this woman screaming, "Take me home, take me home, please, please take me home." And I come out of the nurse's station and I look down the hallways and there's nobody there. Shirley's still sitting there. But I figured that whoever it was that was calling, the issue was addressed by someone. So I turned to go back into the back of the nurse's station. And again, I hear, "Take me home, take me home, please, please take me home." And I turn and it's Shirley. Shirley's the one calling out. And so I walked over to Shirley and I asked her, I said, "Shirley," I said, "who do you want to have take you home?" And she was facing a hallway where we had a patient that was actively passing the first door on the right. And she was pointing down the hallway and she said, "Look at the angels. Aren't they beautiful?" And she continued to call out to them. And of course, I looked with my second sight, and that woman's loved ones and angels were literally bulging out of the wall into the hallway. And that's what Shirley was seeing. And Shirley herself passed away about 3 or 4 months later. So yes, I'm ready for questions. Go ahead.
Okay, a question for Lynn is, what is the most important thing we can say to a loved one as they're transitioning? She says, I'm guessing it's "I love you," right?
That it's okay for them to go. That is okay for, yes, of course, to love them, but it's also important to let them know that it's okay for them to go. Because sometimes they linger for people that are grieving at the bedside, and they kind of stay connected. Grieving is okay, for people to do, but sometimes if it's a long, drawn out grieving, it kind of anchors the soul here somewhat, and it makes it more difficult for them to cross over and do what they're supposed to do.
The reason why I was smiling and laughing while you were talking about the other patient, that's exactly what my mother did.
Really?
In her case, it was a bologna sandwich, and she's sitting on the couch, and I see her, doing this, and I went, "Well, what are you doing?" She says, "I'm feeding them." I said, "Well, don't feed them, more will come." And I remember how awkward it was going into, like, when she had to go to the hospital. And they would ask me, I knew what they were after, and they'd say, "Is she hallucinating?" And I looked at them and I said, "Well, that depends what you mean by hallucinating. I'm a ghost hunter.
Yeah.
And I see these cases all the time now. It depends what you mean by hallucinating. I believe she's seeing her relatives. You believe it's, something else."
And she was.
Yeah. And I went through that with my mother. Same things you're describing.
That's amazing. And everyone, they are seeing their relatives. And a lot of times when they're talking about a relative, they're not talking about someone that the family themselves doesn't already know. On occasion, they might talk about the Oriental lady sitting in the corner and may not even recognize her themselves, but they will when they cross over, because that might be someone that didn't come in during this lifetime with them, but is waiting to greet them on the other side as well. So yes, they are seeing their loved ones coming in. And the problem is a lot of times, because people are so uncomfortable with having a dead person in the room, that they'll run and get the nurse to get the medication to shut the transitioning patient up, there is so much that you can learn from a person that is actively dying. If you can get past the grieving at that point, they're not dead. It's not the last time that you're going to see them. You will see them again. So, if you can kind of look at it like they're going on a long vacation, but this is not the end. You will see them again. That it's important.
Another question. Does Lynn think that Alzheimer's is a part of the transition for some people?
Alzheimer's is not. Alzheimer's is a brain deteriorating disease that they really don't have they die, that they really don't have a reason for. They think it might be hereditary, but then again, maybe not. They really don't know what causes it. They're kind of trying to learn some things. But no, the beautiful thing of it is that this woman, even though she hadn't spoken a word in 3 years, she recognized the angels and knew what they were, and she was calling out to them appropriately to take her home, that that's what she wanted to do. So no, the Alzheimer's is not part of the transitioning part. And a lot of times too, you'll see a change in that Alzheimer's patient when it comes closer to their time to end. I mean, time to transition over.
Let's see. I'm looking at these. Oh, we're getting a lot of comments here. Okay, let's see. Having worked for a lot of years, I can relate. Yeah, Pamela Schmidt has worked in nursing home or in the nursing business for a lot of years, so she can relate to what you're saying.
Well, good. I'm glad. And sometimes too, and just to let you know, everybody. I've seen atheists, I've seen Jehovah's Witnesses, I've seen Presbyterians, I've seen Buddhists. All of them cross over. The only thing that stops you from crossing over is yourself. And that's if you choose to stay earthbound. And you do have a choice, just like on this earth. And usually the ones that choose to stay here are the ones that end up haunting houses, and Charlotte has to go and chase them out. Yeah. So, but the thing is that a lot of times the reason why the soul remains here is because of religious beliefs. Maybe they feel that they're not worthy, or that they're going to be sent to hell or something like that. Or maybe they were watching over a loved one or a pet during this lifetime, and they expected them to cross before they did. So they kind of still linger. And then when that actual being that they were watching over, or pet, passes over, that soul gets stuck here. And as you notice with souls, they're either looking forward or side to side or down, but they're never looking up. And really all you have to do is ask them to look up so that they can reconnect with that cord that connects us all with that, because they kind of lose their way. But if they look up, you'll see them almost instantly disappear. They'll just go. So, and that's a wonderful thing. But I have a funny story to tell you about a man that had not crossed over. When people are crossing over, a lot of times some of the lost souls will come close because they're curious, and they also notice the angels and the beings that are coming in to collect them. And I was working, and I was in front of this patient's room that was actively passing, and there was a sitting area in front of me with pillars. And behind one of the pillars, kind of peering out to the side, I see this. It was a ghost. It was a man. And I said, I'm like, hi, hi, type thing. And of course, he's looking over his shoulders because by his appearance and his clothes, he was maybe alive in like the 1800s. I mean, he appeared to have money, not like upper class, but like upper middle class, because his clothes that he had on were nice clothes. So I said, no, you there. I said, why haven't you crossed over? And so he realized that I was talking. So he kind of comes over and more towards my side, on the side of the med cart, so I could see him. And I mentioned him, I said, this lady over here is crossing, and I can help you cross over if you want to go. There aren't that many people that can see you. And when they do see you, they probably run off screaming. So, it might be, this is a good deal. This is a chance here for you to go. And you might even be able to go when these people go. Not that you have to have somebody to go, spirits to go with in that case for this guy. But the thing is he was a handsome man. He looked to be about 35 years old. He had an area with his abdomen that appeared like Swiss cheese. And when they don't cross over, they do still show the cause of death type thing. And to me, when I see that Swiss cheese anywhere on the body, it indicates to me that they have crossed over due to a corrosive disease like cancer, or maybe cirrhosis of the liver, in his case, in the area that it was in. And he had this very, very heavy Irish brogue. And he said to me, "Milady," he says, "I can't cross over." And I'm like, "Oh, sure you can. I can help you cross over." He says, "No, my wife and my mistress are on the other side, and neither one knew about the other." So he stayed earthbound all of this time because he didn't want to have to go across and face the music. And I even told him, I said, "Look," I said, They know now. I said, the cat's out of the bag. I said, and not only that, they may not even be there anymore. They might have gone off to do something else. I said, and really, they look at things differently and they understand things differently. And they're not going to be angry with you when you cross over. And he just kind of smiled at me and faded away. So I don't know where he went or what happened, but I never saw him again. Of course, that was the first time I saw him too. But I thought that was interesting that he chose to stay here because he didn't want to have to admit what he was doing to either one. So, yeah.
I have run into that before, the Brookdale Lodge.
Really?
It's full of gangsters out there, from Prohibition. And when we were there and we were trying to communicate with them, through the psychics, their concern was that their wives would find out they were there with their mistresses. So I have run into that. Libby says, my view on death changed completely after reading Danny and Brinkley's book, Saved by the Light, many years ago. Have you met him, Lynn, or Dr. Raymond Moody?
I have his book. As a matter of fact, I have read Danny's books. I'm trying to get him on my show. I also have a podcast called Synchronicity, Adding Pieces to the Puzzle. I'm also going to have Charlotte. I'm going to see if I can get Charlotte on there. If she's willing to come and talk with me. And I'm trying to get him on there. But, I follow Danny, and I think that he is absolutely amazing. And I'd like to share something about him.
Sure.
He's had like 4 near-death experiences. And on his last death experience, when he came back, he started hugging people more. And people started to say to him, wow, you become such a hugger. You weren't really much of a hugger before. And he says, I'm not hugging you. I'm hugging me. Because when I cross over onto the other side, all of the people that I've given hugs to and got that feel-good feeling is going to come back to me. When I have my life review. So, it's interesting too. People don't realize how much those heartfelt, kind acts of just selflessness that you do for another person, how those rewards do come back to you on the other side in that feel good type thing. And, people, I'm a good person. I pay my taxes and I don't speed. And, I put money in the box at church and, type thing. And those things are good, but it's a different kind of good. Those are things that you kind of have to do anyway, just to be a decent citizen. The things like giving the waitress or the delivery person an extra $20 that you didn't have to, because they're working and you don't realize that they're trying to pay their water bill, or picking up a box of kittens. And yes, animals count too. Animals count too. In your life review, you better be nice to animals, because you're definitely gonna reap what you sow in that one. But you pick up the box and get it to someplace safe with that. And when I say reap what you sow, you're not judged on the other side. You judge yourself. But the thing about judging yourself is that you go through things, and let's say you bullied somebody, you're put in that person's shoes and made to feel what you created with your actions. And they're not pleasant. It's not pleasant. You get to see the rippling effect, but you also get to feel the good things that you did too. But, it's important to understand that sometimes that's not pleasant. But even with animals, you need to take care of your animals, make sure that they're, even fleas, you need to be responsible for taking good care of them. But anyway, I thought that was really, really cool that he did that, and that people just need, walk up to a homeless person, and give them a sandwich. Maybe even give them a hug. I know that sounds, some people are like, oh, well, they smell fine. I can promise you what you get from giving that homeless person a hug that no one has touched in a loving manner in years. What you will get from it will be more than they get from it, because of the feeling. And then go home and take a shower. You know what I'm saying? If you're worried about odor or something like that. But there these selfless kind acts of love are so very, very important for people to do while they're here. Definitely step forward. And if you notice something going wrong, you would also step forward with that and expose it and try to be of assistance. So it is important.
Another question in the chat room from Pamela. Can souls who have passed come back to get their family and go back to the other side with the person? Yeah, but the person who just passed, and what do they do when they get to the other side?
Okay, how that works is one, like I said, you can choose to cross over or not. Both of them keep all of their senses. One keeps their addiction and their cause of death exposed and their mental illness and all of that. Those are the ones that decide to stay here. When you cross that boundary over, you become more perfected. You can come and go as you please. And the thing is everything there is done with thought. They communicate through telepathy. And if they want to go somewhere, my mother told me this too, they want to go somewhere, they think of it and they just go. If they want to see a person or a person's thinking of them, they connect. They can also be in 6 places simultaneously. So they can be with you and your brother and your uncle all at the same time. But when you connect with them, when you're thinking of them, they are right there. They are right there. And also, they can come back. As I said, they can come back. There was something else I was going to say, and it kind of slipped my mind. But with my mother, I made a pact with her to ensure that I would be sure, even on a stressful day, that she was there. I had asked her to leave one of her, she had long hair like mine, but it was beautiful pearlescent white. And I asked her to leave her hairs. And even on the day of her funeral, I wanted to relax in a bubbly tub. So I ran a tub and put some bubbles in it. And when I came to get in, lengthwise, laid on the top of those bubbles was one of her hairs. To this day, I have moved to a house that she's never been in, a car that she's never been in. Even this past Thanksgiving, I still found one of her chairs, one of her hairs laid across the chair in the house. And when I had gone back to school to further my degree, it was a day that I had to go to a class and take a very, very stressful test. And I had to stop at the school bookstore first. I picked up a 3-ring binder and the loose leaf papers that were supposed to go in. It went straight from the bookstore to my car, to the school, to my classroom, took the bag in. And when I opened up the 3-ring binder, in the middle ring looped in the teeth was one of my mother's hairs. Now, that could have been a fluke, but it was comforting to me. But you know what? There were hundreds of 3-ring binders for me to choose from. And I didn't look inside of it when I picked it up. I just picked a blue one. You know, there was green and red and all different colors. And there was no way that it could have gotten there any other way unless she had put it there. And even if the person has passed, they can hear you like we're talking. They can hear you. You can make a pact with them even when they're on the other side. Choose something as a symbol, a ladybug, you know, something. They can move cards. They can move feathers. Sometimes they can open and close doors if they've been here long enough. But they can do these things. And it may not, like you might see a ladybug on your windowsill during the winter months. And it's like, wow, how did that even get there? Or you might open a page of a magazine and there's a ladybug. That all counts. They're letting you know that they're present with you at that time. So
what I did when my mother died was I bathed her in a certain soap. And so when she's here, I can tell she's here.
Yeah.
Because I can smell that scented soap.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's kind of cool. She's here a lot. She's here a lot more than I thought she would be.
Yeah, she leaves her calling card. Oh, something I wanted to share with you too. My mother was telling me when she was talking about the telepathy, I asked her, I said, Mom, don't you ever miss the taste of the potato salad that you used to make, or the brownies or barbecued ribs? I mean, I like food. So I wanted to know. And she's like, well, we don't eat here. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course not. She says, however, when we think of the food that we've experienced, that we want to taste, it comes to us, the flavor and the sensation of eating it comes to us as if we are eating it. And I said to her, oh my God, can you imagine if we had that here? You could eat whatever you want. You don't have to worry about salt or cholesterol or anything, So, but I thought that was a really interesting thing that she shared with me. Every once in a while, she comes through like a megaphone, type thing. Before she died, she was the one that would always make our turkeys at Thanksgiving, and she passed away in July. So the duty of making the turkey fell into my lap, of which I had never made a turkey before. Mm-hmm. So I'm Googling, the turkey thing, and I'm getting it ready. And all of a sudden, like a megaphone, I hear her come through and she says, don't forget the aluminum foil. And I'm like, I don't want any aluminum foil. I want one of those nice brown turkeys like the ones they have on TV.
Yeah.
And of course, I found out very quickly that the reason why you need the aluminum foil is to even out the cooking. So I ended up burning the breast and the legs were raw. And we ended up having hamburgers for Thanksgiving that year. And of course, I had to apologize to my mom for not listening. And now from now on, I put aluminum foil on the turkey. That's for sure. So, yeah.
That's funny. Lynn, thank you so much for coming tonight.
It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure. Please reach out anytime. I'd be happy to share with you if somebody cancel or whatever. Also,
Sure.
and don't forget people to share this out and subscribe. Give it a thumbs up, like Charlotte said in the beginning. I do have a website. It's www.lynnmonet.com. I also have a podcast on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time, which would be, I think, 5:30 your time. Or you're 3 hours, 4:30, 5:30. Yeah. Synchronicity, adding pieces to the puzzle every Tuesday night. I also co-host Journey Through the Gate with Cisco on every last Sunday of the month, and usually the second Sunday of the month as well. So you can find me there. You can reach me through my website. It does have an option for email. I do answer my own emails. So if you have any questions or anything that you want to reach out for, I have my books being sold through my website. I've got Omnipresent, What Happens Next. I've got Omnipresent 111 Becca Dawn Drive coming out at the end of April, which is a third book, is a story about a ghost that was going from house to house pulling down women's underwear during the nighttime. And I have a picture of that ghost. I took it with my own camera. I have it's the first naked ghost I've ever seen. And he's standing there covering his Johnson, like he's modest after he goes and harasses women in their sleep. So that's the third of the series. Colors of Heaven is there. I also have a book that just came out called The Gap, What Else Your Adolescent and Teen Needs to Know, which talks about everything from going out on your first date without stinky sneakers, because no matter how beautiful or cute you are, stinky sneakers are not attractive, and what to do if a condom breaks. So it talks about a lot of good stuff too. So anyway, you can find me there.
Awesome. That is awesome. Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming on. And I was smiling and laughing because, like I said, I went through all that with my mother, and I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, I spent 11 years taking care of my family, and being able to be there at the very end with both of them was huge.
Yes, it surely is. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Are we gonna go to the green room or the backstage, or are you gonna sign off at the end here?
Oh, I'll talk to you afterwards if you want.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. Good. That would be great.
All right. I'm gonna drop you off right now. I'm gonna just.
Thank you, everybody. Much love and light.
Yep. Don't leave.
Okay, I won't leave.
Okay. All right. That was fun, and like I said, I went through the stuff with my mother and my father, and I can attest to everything she's saying. I mean, I saw stuff. I heard my mother shout at my father at one point. I guess he came to get her, and she wasn't ready to go, and I heard her shout at him saying, "I'm not ready yet. Leave me alone." You know, so I've been through the gauntlet. Anyway, tomorrow, Nancy Matz is with us, and we're going to be talking about spiritual attachments. So we'll be looking forward to that. Usual time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. Also, I haven't done this in a while. You know, be on the lookout for the for the Patreon. Like I said, I'm going to put the link up later on tonight on these things. So when you go to YouTube, you can check it out. But also, you see that ticker running at the bottom. That's because California Haunts is nonprofit, and you know, all these bills and everything you see for the show and my paranormal team come out of my pocket. If you could help me out a little bit, so I keep the show on the air and keep going, that would be great. You know, I've got internet stuff to pay for and all that kind of equipment. Something breaks, you know, it'll. You could do that at paypal.me/California Haunts, or you could do that at Venmo at California Haunts. You know. Okay. Anyway, that being said, thank you guys for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, and I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. So here we go.